a professional relationship, but still comes with enough compassion that they will actually affect change in their life. It's not taught. It's what people bring of themselves.
Hello, welcome to the CEDRD, a podcast connecting newer professionals in the field of eating disorders
to those of us who have been around for a while. I'm your host, Beth Harrell, a certified eating disorders registered dietitian and supervisor.
And I'm Abbi Brown, a registered dietitian who is newer to the field.
I think of myself as a well-seasoned cast iron skillet with wisdom and experience, yet always ready for something new.
And I think of myself as an Instapot with innovation and a fresh perspective. This podcast brings both to the table to share ingredients, recipes, and techniques of past and present so we can all be our best for the future.
The kettle is heating up. The skillet is on simmer. So join us around the table for true professional nourishment. Abbi, ready to stir the pot?
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome back to the CEDRD, or welcome to the CEDRD if this is your first time checking us out. Today we're talking with Amanda Mellowspring. She is a certified eating disorders registered dietitian and supervisor. And you may not have heard of her, but I think you'll be glad for the introduction because she's quite the force, not out on social media, but has done some amazing work over the past 15 years or so to shape our field. She shares with us how she taps into the it factor of her supervisees, basically how she enjoys combining art and science by highlighting the best qualities of their perspective, adding it to hers to create these amazing connections and outcomes. One thing I really align with Amanda is her learning from therapists and medical providers. We put ourselves into the multidisciplinary role, case collaboration, signing ourselves up for therapy webinars. I wish we could webinar all day long. That's one of my favorite quotes of Amanda's in this episode, but just really combining ourselves with other providers. So she also runs a farm with lavender and bees and other things. So listen in. And she answers Abbi's reflection that supervision for eating disorders, especially for dietitians who aren't familiar with the concept of supervision, can feel like a beast. Enjoy. Hello. Today we are with Amanda Mellowspring. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Beth. Hi, Abbi.
Hi. It's so nice to have you. We're really excited to learn from you. You're like the queen of supervision, so we're really excited. So, starting off here, mountains or beach?
Oh, definitely mountains for me.
Me too.
Yes, I'm a mountain girl through and through.
Yeah, why is that?
For me, I think it's the serenity, it's the quiet. I also love the lush, but probably by and large, it's the fall. Autumn is my season.
Me too.
So yeah,
I knew we connected in more ways than one.
Absolutely, we do.
And then breakfast or dinner?
That's a good one. We have a little joke at my house about second breakfast. So I'm gonna have to go with breakfast. I could do breakfast a few times a day, and I generally have breakfast twice a day. With farm life, you gotta get up and get some things done, and then you get to sit down and have real breakfast. So that's
what second breakfast is something to tide you over, and then sit down and have a real breakfast.
Well, so first, the way that I think of it is like first breakfast is like the like cup of coffee and whatever you're grabbing to go out the door to like feed the animals or check on, whatever might be going on outside, and then coming back in. Second breakfast is like, to me, it's the real breakfast. It's like the sit down, have real breakfast food, take your time. Okay. So yeah, that's my meal.
I love it.
I think there's a trend going on right now of RDs living on farms, and I think it's the coolest combination. I love it.
Yes, it is. It's my serenity. It's my, I think a lot of people assume that it's more about being a dietitian than anything else. And for me, it's actually probably my like personal time. It's my time away. So, but it's probably just the saturation of, the things that I love that comes out in different ways.
What types of animals do you guys have?
So we focus on heritage breed animals, which would be on the livestock conservation list. So we have Jacob sheep. We have one Southdown sheep, which is also on the heritage list. We have started raising bees in the past year, which are not technically a heritage breed, but arguably are important and need to be preserved. And we usually have a good number of birds of different kinds. So heritage breed turkeys and ducks and geese and that kind of thing. So right now I have a big lavender bed in front of my bees.
Oh, I can smell that right now.
So it's so lovely. And gardens and dogs. We got to have the dogs.
Of course. I'm really into bees lately, and honey and like the propolis and all of those things.
It's so amazing. They're fascinating animals. It really is. They're pretty amazing how they work together and just intuitively know what they need from each other. It's a really neat thing to learn about.
Mm-hmm. So there's some collaboration here. I need to learn about this. I'm just going to have to come and see.
That's right. There you go.
All right. And then audiobook or paper book?
Oh, I do a lot of driving. And so audiobook is functionally helpful. So I would never say no to that. But paperback book, I like the smell. I like the words. Yeah. I think
you're not alone for sure in that. And one of the reasons we ask those questions is the seasoned RD is about the different level of seasonings we have. And back when I started, we weren't using computers. We certainly didn't have cell phones. I mean, when we started, now we have so much more technology, but almost every generation, it seems, really likes the paper book. Mm-hmm. That's something that's just so, so common for all of us. Okay, Amanda, I'm going to take you back, and hopefully this question isn't too traumatizing to ask. You are a registered dietitian, yes?
Yes.
So back to exam day for the RD exam. What do you remember? Was it a number 2 pencil or a keyboard?
So mine was a keyboard, and I was alone in a room that had 2 computers, and they were like the old school computers that took up, you had to have the extra wide desk to make sure the whole monitor could fit. And the keyboard was attached to the monitor, but the screen was like, I'm not a great IT person, so I might get this wrong, but it was like what I would call like a beta version. It was like a black screen with green words, which I felt was even a little old school at the time, but yeah, it was one question at a time, black screen, green words. I could never sit and do that now because I would need extra strength reading glasses to be able to see that green writing now. And I remember taking the exam, and there was a proctor, in the other little outside room with a window, and I'm taking the exam, I'm going through the questions, and all of a sudden the screen just goes blank. And then in really small words, it said, "Congratulations, you have passed." And I think that's all it said. And it was so small, even at the time. I was like at the screen, I was like looking, and I'm just sitting looking, and I'm like, I didn't really understand that it was going to happen that way. So a few minutes, the proctor's like knocking on the window, and they're like, "You can come out."
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And Abbi told me that if you go in with glasses now, they have to check them because you can have all kinds of technology within your glasses.
Oh, that was not a thing at the time, but it was different than what I expected. I feel like I did some of the practice things, but I don't think I was prepared for what it was actually going to look like, which was a little disorienting at first. Thankfully, there was a Krispy Kreme right outside the testing site, and that was my immediate. I was like, the first thing I'm doing as a registered dietitian is going to Krispy Kreme.
I love it. It's funny because we interviewed Rebecca McConville, and she had the same thing. She sat there and looked at it, and she didn't even know. She didn't see the tiny part. So she went out to the proctor and said, "I don't know if I passed or not." And the proctor said, "I'm not supposed to show you this, but look, it says congratulations." And she was just like sweating.
It's such an underwhelming congratulations. You're like, this is what my career rides on, and that's all I get. There should be balloons, confetti.
Yes.
It's just small print.
Krispy Kreme donuts.
I know. I was like, I had to like up the, excitement level and do something special. But yeah, I agree. It is very underwhelming. So I hear that. evidently that has not changed. So
It's
that
not
part
changed.
of it.
Yeah.
I can attest.
Yeah. What got you interested in becoming a dietitian, and how did you get into the field of eating disorders work?
Yeah, so it's kind of one and the same for me. I, in high school and for many years prior to that, had a really dear friend. She and I were very close, and in high school was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, and really it was a somewhat traumatizing experience, I think, for everyone. It was probably my first experience in life where I couldn't like help another person by doing for them. And it was also really interesting because we lived in a pretty average sized city, but there were no resources. It took her months to be diagnosed. She was given all of the, conflicting diagnoses that we hear with clients all the time of, you have an athletic heart and you are, you're just running too much, or all of these other things that came up. And so when she was finally diagnosed, she had to get treatment outside of the area that we lived, which I think was really, really, for me, was kind of helped me to see how specialized the field was. And for her recovery had a lot to do with just being re-educated by a dietitian about food. And I think to me, it felt like I was really drawn to the fact that someone could be that impactful to another person who was also very wise and intelligent in her own right, but to be so influenced by another person was really meaningful to me. So that's why I decided to study nutrition. I wanted to work with eating disorder recovery from the get-go. I got a little derailed because, again, at that time, there were a lot of folks who felt like, oh, if you want to work with eating disorders, you actually want to be a therapist. So I got a little derailed. I studied psychology for several years, and I did really well, but I also I realized I was like, this is not exactly what I want to do. So I circled back around and ended up back in studying nutrition, which studying nutrition with the idea of working with eating disorders was also just an interesting experience, because it's not the lens that nutrition is taught. So that was kind of how I got into the field, though.
Wow. I mean, I am so very interested in, because you're one of the first people that I know who's gone into the field with already thinking about eating disorders. Most of us come out and kind of learn as we're practicing that, oh, maybe we don't want to be doing this or that, and kind of fall into finding out that we're treating eating disorders without even really knowing it. So and this is one reason that Abbi is just so great as a co-host, is that she's got the current training right now. She's hearing what our guests are talking about, and she's like, what? We're not taught this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was kind of notorious in my nutrition education career of making every assignment about eating disorders. And some of my instructors, I think, got a little worn out by it, but it was, it was like, oh, we need to do, research on a particular micronutrient. Well, I'm going to do an entire research document on micronutrient deficiencies in eating disorders. So it was just everything. A lot of it was just really digging, looking for any information I could get. I got support from my instructors, but not wisdom from the field of eating disorders. I mean, they were wonderful, instructors in their own right, but they were supportive. But it was definitely like, oh, here comes Amanda with another eating disorder example. But it was what kept me motivated, because there were a lot of aspects of nutrition that I, quite frankly, am so grateful that other people are interested in, because they were not for me. So so that's what kept me motivated in my career as being, a student of
who were your influencers back then? There wasn't a whole lot. There's a lot more now, but I'm curious who kind of helped your formation.
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm trying to, honestly, I would say I feel like, and I want to acknowledge the dietitians that have been in the field, prior to me, but I have to say at that point, I didn't have any folks like directing me towards them. And so the people that were more prevalent in the field were almost always therapists. And so that's where I was getting a lot of any, information or insight that I could learn about eating disorders was tending to come from that lens. And then it was actually probably well into my career before I started meeting dietitians who had been in the field prior to me, who really paved the way. And I didn't know I was walking that path, but they had already been there. And so I think, in that regard, there were a lot of therapists and some medical doctors that I think were in, I didn't even go to conferences and things like that until I was already in the field. So it was a little bit of kind of catch what I can, learn what I can. I probably gained a lot more from research at the time, just trying to pull information for course assignments and things like that. So, but so many people I could name, but the reality is that there wasn't an avenue to access them unless you kind of stumbled upon them. I think one of my first books that I read that really influenced me was Anita Johnston's Eating in the Light of the Moon, which is, really not a nutrition book, which is probably what I liked about it at the time too. But it was the first time that I read something that really aligned with like the idea of treating from a place of compassion and really understanding the function of the eating disorder. And I think that really influenced my approach in my career. And so I really love that about her work. And it was through that I started to learn how to access more information. I didn't know that there were treatment centers and whatnot, as I just knew that there was a way to help people, and I didn't know what that would look like.
Right. And now you're chair of a large group of treatment centers.
Yes.
Yeah. And Anita Johnston's Eating in the Light of the Moon was one of my first introductions. And I did attend a conference about every 2 to 4 years. It was the Renfrew Center conference. And I would go to a lot of the therapy tracks. And I had the supervision with my local group in Kansas City of psychologists and therapists. And sometimes, if we were lucky, a psychiatrist would join us. But that's just on a regular basis. We were case consulting and then started into supervision. So it is, you were finding your way, and the research that you were finding, I think even today, there's just not a lot of great research in nutrition and eating disorders. We're better.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminded me of another book. When in grad school, I also came upon Stephen Bratman's book, Health Food Junkies, which is much more commonly recognized now than it was at the time. But I actually went to a naturopathic medical school for grad school that had a nutrition program. And I came upon this book, and I remember bringing it up, and there was like a sordid history at this university with this particular author that he had been invited to speak. And then there were a lot of feelings about his book in relation to, kind of like the natural medicine kind of focus. And so then it was kind of reneged. And then, so it was this very interesting kind of sordid history, but his book also greatly influenced me because I was very interested in natural medicine at the time and still greatly honor that path. But I was also, there studying nutrition to work with eating disorders. And it was this very interesting kind of combination of how to kind of navigate those two different worlds. And I mean, it's amazing to say now that I have a relationship with Dr. Bratman. I've been able to speak with him at conferences. I've co-presented with him a couple different times in a couple different formats, and stay in touch with him. And he's, it's a really neat how small the field is once you get into it. He would say he's not really in the eating disorder field, but still our field is pretty small. And I think that book really influenced me because it was the recognition of what I think I was seeing a lot in my immediate life at the time, which is that like navigating health in a way that is not extreme. I think that also greatly influenced my career path and my, approach to this work.
Yeah. What was the name of that book again?
Health Food Junkies.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And you bring in an important piece about the naturopathic and functional medicine kind of worlds, is that we seem to be in opposing situations. When you said there's controversy, and I'll use the word obesity in quotes, because we know that that's can be more harming to stigmatize someone in that way, obesity or overweight. And so we're trying to come across the aisle and come together. And you have built this relationship with someone who says he's not in the eating disorders world, but he may have been one of the pioneers of kind of recognizing them.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's really true. I often will say about a lot of things in our work, but there's so many more similarities in what we're trying to do for people than differences. But I think that it's easy for folks to get hung up on the titles and like the lingo, like you were saying, Beth, like, the titles and the lingo around the obesity approach, or, weight management, or those kinds of ideas. I think underneath that, there really is at the core more similarity in what we're trying to work with people on, how to empower them and to really be aligned with how they take care of themselves around food in their life. And then there are differences that I think are really significant and can really move people in, different directions for benefit or not. But one of the things that I've always appreciated about Dr. Bratman's book and his approach, first of all, he's extremely funny, and it makes everything just like much more tolerable when someone can give you a dose of humor. But for someone who's really lived that life and is part of that, the community of natural health providers, but to also kind of acknowledge the ways that moderation is key, and the ways that we can kind of get extreme about anything. I think it really opens more people's eyes when you're able to come at it from a place of understanding. It doesn't feel quite as maybe contrary. So.
Sure. Yeah. You teach the Leading by Example workshop for IADEP. So this is for IADEP approved supervisors, and it is a required 3-hour course or webinar workshop so that our supervisors can understand what is expected. And it's taught by medical doctor, dietitian, you, and therapist. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things, the quotes that I pulled out, because I'm going to be honest with anyone who's listening. I could talk to Amanda all day long. And so I'm just trying to pull out some things that I think you might be interested as a newer professional in the field, or RD, is some things that you talked about supervision, like what you learned from, and I'll just bring up that Abbi in one of our previous episodes just said supervision feels like a beast. And it does. And we're not taught that in undergrad or graduate school for dietitians. And Amanda, you were brought up around a lot of psychologists and therapists. And truly, we need to learn and understand the therapy. But you mentioned something, and the statement was, what I learned from my supervisees is gratifying for me. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Absolutely. I am so grateful to the certification process through IADEP and the idea of supervision, because it's become something that I grew a lot in my own career through supervision. It looked a lot of different ways at different times, but I feel like that process really started to solidify for me what supervision means and how it really helps to evolve, to allow me to evolve professionally, but also to really see newer dietitians in the field like growing just exponentially in a professional regard because of supervision. And that's something that, I feel really lucky that I have worked and continue to work with amazing providers in the field of eating disorders that I've learned so much from, that I don't think I always knew it was supervision. But for me, I've become so passionate about offering supervision, receiving supervision, engaging in opportunities to grow in that particular way, because every client that we work with in the field of eating disorders, arguably true in other regards as well, but especially with eating disorders, you never really know everything you need to know, because every human is having their own experience in the world. And even if with the same diagnosis, there's so many variables. And so I've always loved that, as in doing supervision with other folks, they've been trained differently than I have. They've interacted with different people than I have. They come from different backgrounds than I do. And the things that folks bring into supervision that reveals them, like their it factor, I think is always really, really beautiful. And to see someone really bringing that in, I take notes during supervision about what we're talking about so I can track that the next time I talk to my supervisees. But I also take notes of the little tidbits that people say that I think I'm gonna use that. I love how you just said that. I love, I was just training some of our new staff at a site the other day, and I was working with them on how to do portioning, how to support clients with portioning. And one of the folks that was in the training group is an art therapist. And she was working with a mock client who was struggling. And she said, think of it as a piece of art. How would you put it on the plate so that it looks like the painting that you're looking at right here? And I was like, that is beautiful. That is not something that my nutrition science mind would have come up with. And it's just, it's things like that where I think, to be a constant learner just makes you better at what you do. So,
oh man, those tidbits of what people say. And when you mentioned art therapy, I think you did a presentation that included the child drawing the table at their house. Yes. And who's at the table and what the table looks like.
Yes.
And that was just fascinating because I love visual learning like that.
Absolutely. I think that's a great example of the being informed by great therapists along the way. There are a lot of ways that they use those types of visuals, but to be able to pull that into the work that we do, I think adds so many layers.
So what do you mean when you say you're learning their it factor? Is that what you said, the it factor?
Yes, I think of it that way a lot because I think this work is something that can be taught. And I think we're doing a better job in our educational system for future dietitians to teach more about eating disorders. So there's a lot of it that can be taught, but I think to really move a person to heal themselves, to have enough of a relationship with a person that is a professional relationship, but still comes with enough compassion that they will actually affect change in their life. That, to me, I always say it's not taught. It's what people bring of themselves. Mm-hmm. And for some people that comes very naturally. And for some people that's more of an evolution, but that's what heals people is the relationship. And, people, we all know that our clients know the information. That's not what they're lacking, but to feel seen and to sit with someone who holds space for them in a way that still pushes them to do more is a really neat thing to be witness to. But I think that's what I love about working with so many dietitians. I get to work with so many dietitians in my role, and I just get to see all of these little flashes of light when I'm working with them.
Yeah. Well, and hearing how you talk about supervision and lots of our other guests as well, it makes me think that supervision isn't really a beast. It makes me feel like this is cool. Like this is just something I want to do. It's not even a should or a have to. And Beth, you're right. It's not something we're taught about is supervision. But even my first instances or introduction of supervision, that's when it seems like a beast. It seems like you have to do all these hours, then you have to do this and such and such. But it's such an awesome learning opportunity, and how you're explaining, Amanda, that, the art therapist was there. And so now you learn a little bit about that, and somebody else has a different avenue. And so it doesn't seem as much of a beast anymore. And I just love listening to how you explain it.
Yeah, Abbi, I'm glad that you said that, because if a person is going for certification, it's not a sprint. It is truly a marathon. You sit back, it's at least 2 years, once a month with your supervisor, 2,500 hours with your client, and the things that you learn along the way. And I'll just give an example of kind of when you were talking about the it factor and learning about each supervisee, had someone reach out and say, okay, I'm newer in the field, I want supervision. And then they said, okay, I have someone who I think has binge eating disorder. Should I take it? Am I qualified to do this? And I said, let's dive in. Let's do it. And I get an email from her right after that, like a week later, saying, I'm so glad that we did this, because she learned so much by putting herself in that situation. But she always then knew that she could reach out to me if she had any questions. But we don't diagnose eating disorders as dietitians. And so we're working with the human, the person, they're compassionately looking at all of the misinformation that they've been given about themselves and their eating. And that's what we can do the best.
Absolutely. And I think too, it's like, I've said to folks before, like, please take the client that's asking to work with you, because they will go to someone else who's not getting supervision.
Yeah.
And it's a team effort, and this is how we learn. And if someone was really not in a place where they were quite ready, I would have a different conversation. But in general, there are, we're not required to have supervision, and there are so many dietitians that I would say that the general public assumes dietitians do understand eating disorders. So dietitians are working with eating disorders all the time, and they may or may not recognize what they're seeing.
Yeah, for sure. You had mentioned some things that you had to learn the hard way, like that your friend had been told she had an athletic heart, she was running too much. Like, how did you learn what you know now about those things?
Yeah, I would say so. My career, once I started my dietetic internship, I used that same super assertive kind of approach, and was able to find a treatment center that would allow me to do an internship rotation there. And so from that point forward, my career has always in some way been adjacent to a treatment center. So I've always worked in some level of care. I've also done private practice, but I would say one of the things that I love the most about working in a treatment program is the fact that I learn from so many amazing, gifted people in all of these other capacities. Like you were mentioning earlier, Beth, like I've worked with amazing medical doctors and psychiatrists and therapists and nurses and support staff that just know clients in a different way. I've also worked with amazing dietitians, both in and out of treatment environments as well. And I feel like that's where I've learned most of what I know. I enjoy going to conferences. I learn a great deal of information by attending conferences and webinars, and there's so many more options than there used to be. It's almost overwhelming now to figure out which amazing opportunity to attend and how to work and not just webinar all the time. But but I would say for me, it's really been a gift that I had the opportunity to work in environments where I learned from such amazing providers. And I've always been so entrenched in the care with clients that it's a really intensive learning experience. It can happen in other environments, but for me, it was the day in and day out of collaborating with teams and being with clients in a really intimate way that really helped me to acquire the amount of information that I have. And I feel like that's one of the things that folks that are working outpatient, supervision becomes even more significant to me to model that idea of teamwork and collaboration. It takes a lot more work in an outpatient environment to do that.
Hugely.
And so speaking of treatment centers, can you highlight Montanito, what that is and what your role is there?
Absolutely. Thanks, Abby. So Montanito and Affiliates is a national eating disorder treatment program, kind of an umbrella of multiple versions of our program at this point. So Montanito was originally started by Carolyn Costin in California. So we have Montanito residential programs. We have Montanito day programs. We have the Oliver Pyatt Centers in Miami, which was originally started by Wendy Oliver Pyatt. And we have residential and day programs there. We also have Clementine adolescent residential programs nationally. And then we have also recently acquired Rosewood Treatment Centers in Arizona. So we have all levels of care from inpatient, residential, PHP, and IOP in our programs across the country. We treat clients of all genders, and our Clementine programs go down to age 11. So we're treating a large section of the eating disorder community, but not everybody. I know that there's still need outside of what we offer, but I have been in a few different roles in the organization, and I am currently the vice president of nutrition services. So I oversee our nutrition services and food service for all of our programs nationally.
Yeah. And your dietitians get supervision, right?
Absolutely. That is one of the things that I really love about the role that I'm currently in, is that everything we do is obviously for the benefit of our clients. But what I love about what I get to do now is fully embrace the fact that our clients receive the best care when our staff is the most supported and informed, and we have the most collaboration and connection as a team. So our dietitians receive one-on-one weekly supervision. We do monthly all calls by kind of division or level of care to address specific programmatic differences. And then we also do monthly internal webinars to help our dietitians practice submitting a proposal and writing a presentation. And then they offer the webinar, and we get CE credits for our team.
Right.
And then I also love that I get to do small group supervision, where I've put some of our dietitians together, and I do small group supervision where we do kind of deep dives once a month on individual cases, just to really support them, to make sure that, a lot of eating disorder treatment environments, there's one dietitian and there's a house full of therapists and other providers. And that's, that's how it works and how it feels. But in this day and age in our field, there's no reason that our dietitians should ever feel alone. And so we really try to make sure that there's a lot of support and connection in that way. So I really love the opportunity to do that.
If we could all have some time at a higher level of care like that, it feels so supportive. And some of my colleagues who move from that level of care to outpatient, we feel a little bit like a fish out of water, because not fish out of water. That was me back when I moved from an inpatient hospital program to my first private practice job. It's like, I feel like, I don't know, it's totally different. Totally. But you're so supported by the full team when someone is at that higher level of care. And then outpatient, what I was going to say is some colleagues now, when they come to this area, it's like you feel isolated. You feel much more alone. And so we can connect via webinars, and we can do all those learnings. And like you said, how to work and not just do webinar all the time. But so the outpatient dietitians, and do you do supervision for outpatient dietitians also?
Yeah, outside of my role at Montanito, the one thing that I have lovingly continued in my own private work is doing professional supervision. And I do supervision with folks who are working towards IADEP certification, folks who are just needing some support in their work and may not be pursuing it. And then I actually have the lovely opportunity of doing supervision with a few folks who are already certified through IADEP, and they just continue to value the collaboration and support of supervision. So yes.
That's awesome. With a newer person, I'm going to go back to this little nugget that I want to see how you would help your supervisee when they say that their client has been told that they have an athletic heart.
Yes, I know. It's
from their doctor, from whoever, their coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like there's a few layers that I tend to approach, and some of it, not to get too specific, but some of it depends on the age of the client and their kind of self-awareness and in relation to their eating disorder as well. But a lot of times I feel like certainly it's important to provide education to the client about how the heart is impacted with malnutrition. And that's, again, one of the things that there was a specific doctor that I learned under for a great deal of time who had some great examples of, how hard someone's heart is working to do normal daily activities when they're undernourished, which is it then appears this in a similar way medically as someone who has an athletic heart, but was able to kind of really help me articulate the differences for a client. So I think having that conversation of like, you have an athletic heart doing very normal daily activities, which is not an indication of health. It's an indication of strain, and kind of having that kind of educational opportunity with clients. But for me, goes back to collaboration and really making sure that you assert that you are an advocate for your client, and making sure to touch base with that medical provider and just follow up. Number one, to make sure that that's actually what was said, because I think the other thing that we all have to keep in mind is that there are different versions of the truth sometimes. And so really making sure that that's the conversation that was had. And then number one, kind of making sure that the provider is aware of the concerns with the client's nutrition status. And then is that an opportunity to educate them? Is there an opportunity that, we could talk more about this? Like, do you want to grab a coffee, or, do you want to, do you have a minute to talk about could I send you some information on this? And really working to align, because I think that's another thing. It's easy to get frustrated with providers that are less informed and feel like I'm just going to refer them somewhere else. And the reality is that, number one, that doesn't help that person learn, but also it's not an option everywhere.
Right. So
the more we can advocate for future clients that may see that provider and helping that person learn more, I think the better we'll all be doing as a society around recognizing and treating eating disorders, hopefully preventing. But,
Thank you. I think that's just another point for collaboration. Some of my screening forms are what I call the medical clearance for outpatient care. The part 2 is a training for the doc, just a little asterisk that says athletic heart versus malnourished heart. And it's just a little bit of a quote from Dr. Gadiani's Sick Enough book about the walk across the room test. So if you have an athletic heart, then your heart rate's not going to change that much, because it is like this well-oiled machine. But if it's doing all that work, like you talked about, then you're going to see a significant change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example of that, like normal activity. And yeah, Dr. Gadiani has a great way of articulating that really clearly.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of a silly term, athletic heart, because I mean, it sounds so cool, like, oh, I'm athletic, like I have a good heart type of deal. But if somebody has all of these really restrictive behaviors and they're being told they have an athletic heart, then they think, oh, well, I'm doing all the right stuff.
Exactly, yeah. Abby.
It seems silly.
Yes, it is. There's a lot of terminology that I think sometimes I think it's uncomfortable for providers to really assert with clients when they're concerned about potential for eating disorders as well. And there's a lot of words that get thrown around to try to soften. I'm a big advocate of, say what you mean with compassion, because that's how you support someone in affecting change. And I think that's one of those examples of like, we're not really saying what we mean. We say it that way.
Yeah. Great. Well, Amanda, I have kind of a little wrap-up question for you.
Okay.
So, and take your time answering this, but taking yourself back to entering the field of eating disorders, what do you wish you would have known then that you know now?
There's so many things that I think, I'm going to give 2 different answers if I can, because one relates more to clients and one more to professional growth. So I'm going to start with the clients, because I would say, I do feel like we're doing a better job in our field now, but I would say I really wish that I had been more informed about health at every size concepts in particular. I feel like intuitive eating, the book wasn't out yet, but I feel like I had some introduction to full recovery and things like that I felt pretty good about. But I would say the idea of health at every size, I feel like it was kind of around, but I didn't feel like I got fully, I didn't feel like I had enough information to fully embrace it and articulate to other people what I was advocating for early in my career. So I would say for sure, when I think about clients, those are the things that I wish that I had a little more or a lot more information about. From a professional standpoint, I wish that I had recognized early on that there's so much potential for what you can do within this field. The three of us were just talking earlier about, eating disorders seems to be such a specialty, but then there's all of these subspecialties within that and different roles that you can play. And I wish that I had just been more aware of the potential. I think I've made my way and I've done pretty well. I feel pretty good about where I've been able to take myself. But I would say, I would have loved to have thought about the fact that learning more about business acumen for private practice purposes, or learning more about personnel management for personnel management purposes. Like, those are things that I just, in my mind, it was pretty narrow. It was like, I'm a dietitian and this is what I'll do. And I'll do it this way. And so I think those would be things and I do see newer dietitians embracing that more and kind of coming in with more like getting an MBA or, things like that I'm like, oh, that was really smart. So, so kudos to folks that are coming in with that information. But those would be my two things, I think.
Oh, those are so important. I mean, what a great summary. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, Amanda. We could talk all day, like I said. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you next time, hopefully in person at some conference somewhere, now that the pandemic is starting to quiet down.
Absolutely. I hope so. This has been so fun. Thank you so much, Beth and Abby. I agree. I could do this all day. This was a great morning event for me. So thank you.
Let's lean on each other and learn from each other so we can grow together as professionals in this field of eating disorders. If you want to connect with me for supervision or membership with monthly content, please find me at bethharrell.com/professionals.